What's the first thing we should see in a movie or television trailer?
It has to just be something that like provokes you to keep watching, really. I mean, it could be a line of dialogue, I guess, or an opening shot that's like, what is that? Like, or if it's recognizable, you can get away with, like if it's IP, I mean, you can probably do kind of more creative ways into a trailer because the audience is already there waiting for it. I don't know if that's because it just depends on what it is that you're cutting and what the style of it even is. Like, yeah, I think like generally it's just, let's just get into it with something that that makes me want to keep watching, really. That's the easiest way to say it, but it really is, it could be so many things depending on what it is that you're cutting.
How do you keep a movie trailer interesting without revealing everything, but keeping it true to the film?
Well, okay, so I have a lot of experience doing promos, which makes it a lot easier than doing full trailers. There's a sort of a trailer format, like a theatrical trailer, let's call it. That's anything that's like 2 minutes, let's say. Those or 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Those become a little increasingly more difficult to hold things back to sustain. And I think that's partially because of what people are used to seeing these days, I think. But promos, like if you're if you're doing a 30-second spot on one, you can definitely do that and they're way more fun in a way because you get to actually kind of just tease somebody to want to watch it. Whereas I do find that sometimes trailers give away everything. Sometimes I don't care, and sometimes I really hate it. It just depends sometimes on the movie. But I've heard a lot of people talk about trailers just always doing this, always giving things away. And like for instance, for me, I saw the teaser of Dune, and I refused to watch anything more because I know I'm going to go see it. So maybe it's just give it up to the audience to decide if they need to see if they need to see the full trailer or not to keep them from being spoiled. But I have to do that myself. So as a trailer editor sometimes.
How many trailers have you edited?
I don't know, 200 plus, maybe. Like when I say trailers, really what I mean is trailers, promos, and spots because they're all related. And if I really was going to throw cut downs in from a full trailer to a 30, then it probably would be like, even higher too. So, yeah, quite a few.
What's the average length of the trailers or promos that you edit?
Most I would say, promos are always going to be 30 seconds. Sometimes they're 15s. Every once in a while you get a 60. Trailers are 90 seconds to 2 minutes, usually.
And do you have a rule for how many shots or frames or whatever you use within those time periods?
No, I think it's just the project that you're cutting will inform the style and, well, not always, but mostly. Most of the time, the project you're working on will inform you what kind of approach you take to create that trailer. So if the film is slow, as in like a long burn, then the trailer is probably not going to be a fast-paced kind of trailer, unless they're trying to disguise something about that film or trick an audience into watching something that it's not. But that's never usually the directive, honestly.
When you watch movie trailers, do you often feel that the trailer misrepresents the film or doesn't do it justice?
That's a good question. I think most of the time, the trailers that you see are going to be an amalgamation of 5 different trailer editors who have cut versions, and then you're seeing one that has all the best spots that the executives have chosen to represent. Right, so it gets tricky in that sense. And then, the other side of it is like, well, is that representative? I mean, like the Suicide Squad trailer made a big splash because it was awesome, and then they changed the movie to be more like it, so the story goes. So that may have something to do with that movie's panning critically. I don't I can't speak to that because I wasn't involved in that project. But it's something that like I would be devastated if somebody cut a trailer of my film that was awesome and maybe different than what the movie was, and then I was asked to make the movie more like the trailer. I mean, can you imagine what that would probably feel like? But that's what they did with that film, and that just kind of shows you, I guess, like that. I don't know. I mean, like it's a business at the end of the day, and yeah, sometimes movies don't or the trailers don't represent the films. I think oftentimes they probably do a decent job of that. Honestly, I mean, there's always going to be examples either way, though, that do one or the other. So I think there's a format that works essentially, and maybe it's a little too calculated now these days, but it does the job. And if you see a really exceptional trailer, it's probably because it's doing something different.
With each decade, there's a different style of filmmaking. Would you say the same with the trailers? If we look back at trailers from, let's say, the 70s, it almost seems like it's just one long scene from the movie.
Yeah. No, of course. Definitely. I also think that trailers are kind of a unique place to really do some creative editing. I like to think that there is an art. They're just as much of an art form as anything else in a way. And of course, I think that because I have like some experience working in that side of the industry. But like there's the Promax BDA Awards, which is mostly for promos and spots and stuff but you go to that and you see all of, the nominations and stuff. And it's pretty cool to kind of get a sense of like, wow, they really did some crazy, unique stuff for that show, or like this campaign, or you know what I mean? Like it is a fascinating place to be, and I think it's a great place as an editor actually to do stuff that isn't you can finish a trailer in 2 weeks, where you're not on something, then you move on to the next one or something. But there's some rewarding part of that process to like start something and finish it like in kind of a quick amount of time that you craft and create, as opposed to working on something for 6 months or 2 years or whatever. There's some value in that part of the industry for sure, even just that way.
Can you take us through the process of what it's like to cut a trailer?
Yeah. So, the first step is you watch down the series or the film, depending on what it is. Films, I think, sometimes are easier to cut trailers for than television series. But I'll get into that in a second. For a film, though, you basically just watch the film down, you make your selects, and what I do is once I've watched that film, I'll usually like kind of experiment with copy or just like ideas of like what am I trying to say? Because sometimes you don't have somebody telling you like, oh, we're going to use this tagline or this tagline or this tagline. But you kind of have, if it's a long trailer in particular, you're going to need it most often. And so you're going to come up with something as you've watched the film, and then you're going to play, there's library music. But obviously trailers are so heavily built around the music. So you obviously have to choose very wisely for that. And the worst note that you can ever get is, hey, the trailer's great, but let's change the music. Because really what that means is you have to redo everything. It's just, so there's that. And then for television, it gets a little more tricky because you more often than not don't have the entire full season to cut the trailer from. And yet you still have to make it maybe a minute, a 90-second spot or trailer and make it exciting, because those episodes are still coming in, are still getting delivered because they're usually on a rolling basis. At least in my experience, it's always been that way. So you kind of have to get a little bit more creative sometimes with like, how are you going to rise up at the end to, slam dunk this series and get people to want to watch it. But the process is generally the same. I mean, you watch it down, you get your selects, you find your music, you cut it together and get your notes back, and then make adjustments and go from there. And there is usually a process where once you've done your first cut, there's usually a lot more people that get involved from that moment on until it gets completely approved. Sometimes it's the directors or the showrunners or executive producers. It just depends depending on what project it is. But there's a lot of hands in it because it's the marketing of their baby or their moneymaker, whatever it is, you know. So you also have to definitely know how to handle criticism and critiques and how to be a good team player, basically.
Sure. And is the same process of figuring out what the note means, it applies to trailers as well?
Yes, it definitely does. It applies to anything, actually. I don't think that there's any example where somebody's giving me a note unless where it's like, can you just take 2 frames off of that? That's when you're like, I'm gonna get a little irritated with you. But yeah, because then that's maybe one note where, yeah, that's really what it means probably. But how dare you? I'm the editor, and I could probably do a little finesse pass at the end once I know it's approved. But you know, realistically though, yeah, any note that you get from anything, whether it's a script, it's like, it doesn't matter. Edit, you know, trailer. There's always usually like a general, hey, like this is the note, and then you have to be like, well, is that it, or is it like the shot that's before that, or is it the moment before that, or is it the character introduction, as I mentioned earlier? Like you have to do that part of the process on your own. But that is, I think, maybe one of the things that always comes out on top in the end if you can nail it, figure out what they're actually getting at.
Would you say there's more hands involved at the end of the trailer being cut, or it's consistent throughout? So do they kind of give you an idea, show you what to do, like in terms of what we want it from this time code to this or whatever, and then lets you run with it, but then toward the end, there's all these hands that get involved? Or is it consistent?
No, I think it's not like all these hands all the time. It's just that you usually have some layers to the process, as in the structure of the company or the business, like, or whatever that you're working with. So it's not that you have all these people. It's more that you kind of it's like you're passing the Donkey Kong levels, you know. Like, oh, okay, we got this approval. Let's go up until it goes to the top of the company. Sometimes even. You know, it just depends. But that's always cool when that happens, because then you're like, well, yeah, like the president of the company loved my trailer. And then, you know, you may have met them, you may have not, but like it's still like, you know, where that like people are seeing your work, and that's pretty cool.
Do you go in and read the comments just to see, did they like this one section, or once the trailer's online?
Well, on that stuff, yeah, I did. I used to do that. Not so much anymore. But also I haven't, like, you know, like I did a lot of trailer and promo editing before I did Phenoms, the soccer series I mentioned. So, like that was about 2.5 years where I worked at Audience Network at DirecTV and AT&T before they closed down. And that was one of those, like, that was my first time into that world, actually, where I kind of got used to like cutting promos for shows and how the process even worked and stuff. But the cool part about promo editing and trailers, for anybody who's interested in that stuff, is again, like I said, you know, you're takes a week or 2 weeks, or, you know, it's a short amount of time where you're on one project before you move on to the next one. So there's always this kind of feeling that you're accomplishing something, and then it's kind of maybe the part of the industry, at least I've found, where the hours aren't super insane. Like, you know, they're kind of more structured in like at least this has been my experience. And that, you know, it's like the least kind of stressful in that sense versus like doing production 18-hour days or 16-hour days, or even editorial posts, like where you're hitting a schedule on a different process. That doesn't mean that you don't have long hours and stuff every once in a while, but at least in my experience, it was like, no, this was structured, and it was like a really nice break for me for a while before it kind of got crazy again.